Hello, welcome back to another Theory Thursday. Today we are doing some quick fire questions. I got 10 questions here it's actually from this site called Guitar Lessons by Brian. I was just browsing, looking at guitar stuff as you do, and I saw this list of questions. I thought that'd be kind of fun to do. So I got 10 questions here, and I'll answer them, try to do them as quickly as I can. Go in depth when I need to, and that's that. So I got my Mickey Mouse watch on today, and I got my gray tweed tie. As always, if you like any of the ties and watches and guitars and amps and all that stuff, I try to link all of that down in the description below if any of that interests you. As always, if you've been enjoying these, please like and subscribe. That helps the channel grow, and I love making these, and I want to keep doing them. So I think that's it. Without further ado, 10 quickfire questions. Let's go. Okay, number one. How long will it take to learn guitar? This is a loaded question because it totally depends. What do you mean by learn guitar, right? Different people have different aspirations, different goals, and it depends on how consistent you are with your practice routine. So there's a lot of factors that play into this. If your goal is just to sit around a campfire and strum chords, and if you are 100% committed to your practice routine, I mean, we can get there in a couple months. It does not take long. And a lot of it, if you practice every single day, it doesn't even have to be a lot. Then you can get there pretty quick. What there is really depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to do. So that's a hard question to answer. Depending on what you do. Now, if the question is, how long is it going to take for me to play like John Williams, then years and years and years and years, and maybe never. So it all has to do with where your goals are and how consistent you are with your practice. So that's that timeline. Number two, should I buy an electric or an acoustic guitar? This is a good question. I'll give you two answers. Number one, it depends. What are your goals? Do you want to be a bluegrass player, play folk and country and finger picking and country music? Then I'd probably say, well, you should probably start on an acoustic, right? Because that's the instrument that is in those genres. Right? You're not going to listen to a Flying V Gibson play, I don't know, James Taylor. You know what I mean? So what kind of music do you listen to? What kind of music do you want to learn? That should influence on where you should start searching for guitars. And your teacher, hopefully you have one, and if you don't, do a lot of research, and you can figure this out on your own. But do your research before you buy a guitar, because there's all kinds of makes and models. There's all kinds of sizes, and all of that can be, personally fitted to you, depending on what your goals are. So, answer number one is, it depends. Because then if your idol is Slash, right, Guns N' Roses, then of course go out and buy. Probably start with an Epiphone Les Paul, right, on the cheaper side. I wouldn't go out and buy a Relic Gibson right away, but it makes sense to buy an electric guitar. Now, the other answer to this question is maybe you don't know. Maybe your parents are saying you need to learn an instrument. This is the one that you're going to learn. Maybe you don't have a choice in the matter. I don't know. Whatever the situation is, you need to learn guitar, and you have to pick one, and you don't have a real specific goal in mind. I would say start with acoustic anyway. A couple reasons. One, it's portable. You can play it anywhere, and you don't need an amplifier, right? What does that mean? You can practice it anywhere. You can do the same with electric too, but your bell curve might fall off the more and more you do it, because it's just not going to be as loud. Whereas the acoustic, you're going to be able to play it anywhere. Number two is the acoustic guitar uses thicker strings at a higher tension, and the action is typically a little higher. Excuse me. Of course, all of that depends on genre and type of guitar and all that stuff, or classical, right? You probably have nylon strings if you go that route. But a typical steel string acoustic guitar has a little bit higher action, thicker strings, higher tension strings. So what that's going to do is toughen up your fingers quite a bit, so that if you decide to switch to electric in the future, it's going to be no problem. It's going to feel like an easier version of guitar, really. So that's what I would suggest. Number 3, what size pick should I get? This is a personal preference thing, and it really comes down, like I said, personal preference. It's just going to take some time to get used to a size of pick. If I had to throw one out there, I'd just say the 1 millimeter. That's all I have. I got a ton here. Let's see here. Yeah, I got a bunch of these Diodario 1 millimeter picks. They're, middle of the road. For when I'm using a pick, they're fine. They're stiff enough that I can pick really cleanly, and soft enough that I can strum chords. It's perfect. Middle ground, 1 millimeter. And when we're talking about sizes, we're talking about the thickness of the actual pick, not the size of the overall thing. So a thinner pick would be easier to strum chords. A thicker pick, easier to play one-note lines. So that's the difference between those. But yeah, it all comes down to personal preference. Try out a bunch. Right? They're cheap, and usually good music stores have great deals on them, like 5 for $3 or whatever. So number 4, what size strings should I get? Depends on what guitar you have. If you have a steel string acoustic, and you're just starting out, I would say 10s or 11s. 10s is a little light for acoustics, but if you're just starting out, you don't want to beat up your fingers too bad. 12's the absolute highest I would go for a beginner. And then if you're on an electric, start out with 9s. It's thin, but it'll get you in the door and playing. So that's what I'd say 9s for electric, 10s or 11s for acoustic, depending on the age of the player. Number 5, how often should you practice? This is similar to how long is it going to take to learn, right? How often you practice does depend on you as a musician. What are your goals? Because if your goal is to be able to play this piece, of course you're going to be practicing this nonstop, every day. But if your goal is to just learn these couple chords and be able to switch in between them, maybe that's not going to take as long. What I will say is, and I've said this in another video, I can't remember which one, consistency matters more than the length of a practice session. I would much rather have a student practice every single day for 20 minutes, half an hour, even 15 minutes. If you can do it every single day, that's going to be more beneficial to you than to pick one day a week and practice 2 hours. Right? That's not going to get you the gains you want. It's not going to progress you in the way that a consistent practice schedule would, even with the shorter times. Okay? Consistency is more important than the length of the practice session. So I'll leave you with that. And that obviously depends on what your schedule is as a student. You got life going on, work or school, depending on where you're at in life, and you need to, balance things. So, number 6, how do you care for your guitar? A couple different things. If you have an acoustic, you're going to want a humidifier. In the winter, depending on where you live, this really is geographic. In the winter, things are going to get dry, and you're going to want to be able to humidify it. In the summer, things are usually humid, and this is a less of a problem, but you may need something to take the moisture out of the air, although I see a lot less of that than the dryness issue. So a humidifier, stuff like that. Change strings when they need to get changed. Dust if you leave guitars out in the open. Just simple stuff like that. Humidifying is probably the big thing. Electric guitars are a lot easier to take care of because they're just a slab of wood with no hollow. Right, the wood's thicker, so it's not changing as much. And there's a bunch of poly urethane or whatever it is covering the body, so it's hard for the wood to move as opposed to an acoustic. I will say humidity level does affect electrics still, specifically the neck. You'll see there's a hexagonal bolt nut that's somewhere on your neck, and that's the truss rod, and that will determine whether the neck is bowed or concave, convex or concave, and that's affected by humidity. So if you have a neck, if this is the guitar, like lying down flat, and the neck is concave like this, where the action from the neck to the string is really high, that's a dry guitar. Usually. Now, sometimes it could just be you've twisted the truss rod somewhere wrong, and it's just bad right now. But usually it means dry, and if it's the other way, concave or convex, whatever the opposite of what I said earlier was, that's usually over humidified. But again, that could also just be you've twisted the truss rod in a wrong direction, 3 months ago and didn't realize it. So, but that's just a quick tip. It could mean a couple things, but usually it's humidity. But yeah, same thing. Just change strings when they need to be. Dust if you leave your guitars out in the open, and easy peasy. Number 7, what is a metronome? A metronome is a device, could be an app or an actual device, physical thing that you have that keeps time. So you can set it to a certain BPM, that's beats per minute, and it will press on at a consistent beat, tick, 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 tick. And what it does is it helps you practice tempo, keeping in tempo. So when you're playing, that people can follow along with you, and you can play with other people because you're all at the same tempo. So that's what a metronome is. It keeps you in line is what it does. Number 8, what is a capo? A capo, I have one right here. This is one version of a capo. And what it does is you clamp this onto your neck, so the strings are right here and the back of the neck is right here. You clamp this on, and essentially what it does is it takes the nut and moves it up to whatever fret you clamp that capo onto. So, for example, if you just have your guitar and you play an E chord, just a basic E shape, that's an E. Now, if you wanted to take a capo and put it on the 5th fret, right, which is usually the second dot, if you count up your neck, there's a dot at the 3rd fret, usually the second dot is right at the 5th fret. Place that capo there, and then you play your E shape way up there. That's not an E anymore. It might be an E shape in your head, but that's actually an A major chord. Why? Because we've taken this nut and all these strings, and we've tuned them up to right at the 5th fret. So that open, low E string you have there is now an A. So that's what it does. It just transposes the instrument quickly, just like that. And that's that. Number 9, is using a capo a crutch? Yes and no. Two sides of the same coin, depending on how you use it. And even then, I guess it depends on what your goals are. I was thinking it would be a crutch if you only learn your 4 chords, right? Any 4, it doesn't matter. G, C, D, E minor, or C, G, F, A minor, it doesn't matter. Whatever your power, your, what do they call it? Ultimate 4 chords or whatever. And then those are the only shapes you ever learn, and then you can move it up. Then I would say that's a crutch. But then in that split second, I was thinking, well, maybe not necessarily. If you don't have any further goals or further aspirations with the instrument, I don't think that's a crutch. You accomplished what you set out to do. What's the issue with that? So, I will say it can be a crutch if you're looking to grow. For example, a lot of learning bar chords is a big hurdle for a lot of students, and the capo kind of bypasses that. So if you are playing a song in the key of G, and it's just the 1, the 5, the 6, the 4 chord, you don't need any bar chords. And okay, so then let's say you find a song in the key of, I don't know, A. And now all of a sudden your 1, 4, and 5 chords are A, E is 5, D is 4, and F sharp minor is your 6th chord. That's a bar chord. Okay? So instead of learning that, what you can do as a someone with a capo, you can plop that capo down on the 2nd frets and play those shapes you know, G, D, E minor, C. And so you're playing familiar shapes with no bar chords, but you're playing in the key of A, and you can play those chords. So that's where maybe it becomes a crutch, is if you're using it in place of learning something else. Granted, you want to learn something else. If that's as far as you want to go, then that's fine. But if you're looking to grow, then maybe that's when it becomes a crutch. I just dropped my paper. One second. And finally, number 10, how do you know when it's time to change strings? Good question. There'll be a couple things that happen. For one, if you take your fingers off and there's dirt all over them, usually that means, maybe I need to change the strings. 2, you can visibly see, if you look at the string and see it change colors where you've played it for months and months and months. And usually if you get real close and you can pick in between the edges, and if there's dirt coming out of that, usually it's time to change strings. Another common one is if the string starts to actually unwind. So the lower strings, usually the E, the A, and the D strings, are one steel string with another steel string wrapped around it, and that's where you get those edges on the strings. That can get unwound if left for too long and played for too long, and it does affect the sound. But more importantly, it's easier to break. So you might be up playing a gig and snap, there goes your string, and usually leaves a pretty nasty mark on your hand, God forbid your face or eye. And you can, run your finger along the string too, and you'll be able to feel the dirt if it's too bad. It depends on how often you practice, though, is really in gig. I feel like gigging puts way more sweat and dirt on my strings than practicing, because you're up there actually sweating. But that's just me. So those are a few things to look for when you're thinking about changing strings. So that was 10 quick fire questions. I kind of like doing this. I might do more in the future. So if you've been enjoying these, please like and subscribe and all that jazz. It'll help grow the channel. I love making these, and I want to keep making them. So I think that's it. I think that's enough info, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye.